Okay, well, welcome everybody to our November climate webinar, Communities Making a Difference. I specifically want to welcome everybody from all over the globe, the various time zones and different life circumstances and challenges. I would like to acknowledge that many of us are meeting on land that was first settled by the First Nation peoples, and I want to offer my thanks to them for their stewardship of the land. We learn from them some of the ecological solutions that are already being put in place by those of us that are not part of the First Nation peoples. In addition, I want to acknowledge this particular moment in time. Many of you are aware that COP26 has ended. It's the gathering in Glasgow where the world's nations met to ratify a new environmental agreement. And while some progress was made, it was incremental, fell short of what's needed. But where governments have difficulty dealing with the complexity of the issues, grassroots efforts can provide direction and impetus for change. So our individual and community initiatives do matter. Our task is to remain faithful to the call, to remain engaged until success is achieved, and that we achieve our vision, which is the flourishing of life for all. You simply being here affirms that community involvement is important, and we're grateful for your presence and hope that your influence will continue to grow. It can be overwhelming to know where to start and what to do. So today we're going to hear from individuals in Community of Christ whose congregations have been taking some steps, both large and small. What we share today are only clips from larger interviews that include much more detail and suggestions. But the full stories, the full interviews will be posted on our website, seaofchristclimatejustice.org. This webinar has been particularly challenging technologically and very complex. So as we move through this webinar, we ask for your grace and patience. And my hat's off to Rod Downing for all of the technical expertise he has brought to make this happen. So our vision of the flourishing of life for all is one of the things that we hope will get you excited about joining the common good and wanting to make a difference. Today, there's going to be a lot of ideas shared in these videos, and I suggest that you jot down anything that captures your attention. You probably will not remember all of the ideas that are presented today, so jot down the things that really capture you. Bring your list next week to the conversation. That will help us as we talk about what happens this week. And put questions in the chat box for us to consider next week also. Some of our presenters are here today and will be with us next week to answer questions. So now I'm going to turn it over to Joan to set the stage for our videos. Oh, you know what I forgot? I forgot to tell you about the coming attractions. So let me tell you about the coming attractions, and then Joan, you can take it. So our conversation today, Communities Making a Difference, will be followed. Our webinar today will be followed by the conversation next week on Communities Making a Difference. And then we are planning on a climate prayer vigil that you can join and will most probably be on December 31st. We will announce the details of that and make sure that you get that announcement. In January 9th, Randy Litzenberg will be back to talk to us about COP26, what happened, what it means, what the future looks like with the agreements that they have made, and where we are. So he will be back to talk to us about COP26 and give us a little bit of an update. And then we'll have a conversation about that on January 16th. As I said, we will be showing some videos of congregations that are doing some things. If your congregation is involved with environmental issues, contact me or Rod Downing. Rod's email is there on your screen. And let us know that you would be interested in talking to us, and we'll do a video of you sharing what your congregation is doing. Okay, now Joan, you can take it away. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. So how is it that our congregations can begin to take action or move forward with further action on the climate crisis? There is no simple, magical, one-size-fits-all program to be followed. Each congregation is unique, made up of individuals with a wonderful diversity of interests and passions. And the circumstances are different based on geography and nationality. For instance, for congregations in Southern California faced with droughts and wildfires, a key issue is how to conserve water while minimizing fire risk in landscaping. For those in Canada or the northern US, however, how buildings are heated in the winter is a key issue. We're sometimes faced with a cacophony of voices saying conflicting things and proposing conflicting actions, all with increasing urgency. But there's no ministry manual for us to follow here. There's no history of how preceding generations of disciples have paved the way. We're facing a global event unprecedented in human history, but one that demands immediate attention and action. We need a framework. As we've considered this need, our minds have been drawn back again and again to the words of President Vesey when he spoke just over a year ago at the Greater Pacific Northwest Zoom worship service. His topic was the role of a prophetic people in a time of crisis. The entire sermon is available on our website, seaofchristclimatejustice.org. We want to hold up for your consideration the words of his summary statement. And I'm going to read it all because we think it's so foundational. A prophetic people must accurately discern true realities that may not be apparent to others, or realities they may not want to face. A prophetic people envision an alternative future in harmony with God's nature and purposes for creation. A prophetic people engage in initiatives that seek the best future for humankind and creation. A prophetic people seek just solutions that secure the well-being of the most vulnerable. And of course, a prophetic people always pray, plan, and act in hope. As we have repeatedly considered these words, we began to see in them the essence of an action plan. It says a lot in a few lines, so we broke it down to take a closer look. Here is our formula for action and response. We begin with looking at and discerning true realities, whether they're ones we want to face or not. One of the realities that science is telling us we need to face is that our current lifestyles are simply unsustainable and that we're all facing a hotter, wetter, and wilder future with constantly accelerating suffering. Once we've accepted that reality, we envision a better future and then plan and act to accomplish it. While we do, we make sure that the well-being of the marginalized, the poor, the most vulnerable is secured. And we do all of this in hope. It's too late to get out of this mess without additional suffering. Suffering is already happening at an ever-increasing pace. But there is great hope for a better future if we come together to drive effective change. As a step-by-step plan, it might look something like this. We begin with learning more about the science, the current reality, and the predicted future outcomes. We dialogue and discuss with each other as we do. We look for local groups who we might wish to partner with. For some congregations, this might be a whole congregation process, perhaps using the adult church school time. For others, it might be a small group of people who form a study and action group separately from the main congregational activities. And as we're learning, we're also praying and discerning where our unique mix of giftedness, passions, needs, and opportunities is leading us. We adopt and embrace a posture of prayer and discernment that undergirds and informs all aspects of our action. As we identify paths of action, we simply take the first step or steps. We don't need to have a complete plan in place first. We simply take the first step, and that leads to another, and that leads to yet another. We heard this again and again in the interviews about different congregations, campgrounds, and mission centers. Back in August 2020, Zach Harmon McLaughlin did a Project Zion podcast on interfaith partnerships and advocacy. It's podcast number 296 at projectzionpodcast.org if you would like to listen to it. He talked about adopting Mother Teresa's philosophy that the way to change the world is for people to do small actions with great love, and how this led him to the realization that the first start with baby steps, and that we build the bridge as we're walking on it. Something that resonates with our team and the poem that was written for us. Simply take the first step, then see what next steps open up, and continue to take them. As we move through the initial steps, broader dimensions and opportunities will emerge. We may begin with addressing some building and infrastructure changes, and that leads us to an opportunity to partner or network with a local group. And suddenly that leads us to a local social justice need or biodiversity need. That takes us back to the first step again of looking realities squarely in the face and learning more about them. This is a continuous spiral of interrelated steps and actions. And what permeates and undergirds all of it is an attitude of hope. These sources love to paint gloomy pictures because that grabs attention. But we look in faith and trust to God's good future for all of creation. We understand that we're not required to carry the weight of the entire world on our individual shoulders, but rather to discern and act in harmony with the movement of the Holy Spirit. So now Lori will lead us through a truly grounding approach to the discernment process.
Greetings, friends. I add my greetings to Susan's and Joan's. And I want to recognize that as we engage prophetic leadership and action, which is what Community of Christ has been called for, but I want to recognize also there are folks here who are on this call who are friends of, but may not be participants in a congregation, but are parts of other communities, as well as folks who are doing their prophetic leadership in all sorts of ways. This piece about communities making a difference is a call to prophetic action and leadership from all, that we all bring together, or we wouldn't even be here together today. And I come with the conviction that any prophetic action, any leadership that we might bring begins with prayer, is permeated by prayer, and that it actually never but does end in prayer. Indeed, I think prophetic action itself is prayer. Now, there are some very effective resources that can help us, or a small coalition of climate friends in your community, your congregation, your whatever your context might be, to enter a deliberate process of discernment about how to engage with and respond to the climate context, or climate crisis. And those resources can include books like Elizabeth Liebert's Soul of Discernment. And I would also put in a plug. I know there's some people here who are actually actively learning and being trained as spiritual leaders to help facilitate a discerned response. But that is not what I want to talk about today. I want to offer you a story, then some words for consideration, and a text that we will linger over together as you seek to lean into both a personal and a communal response to the desacralization and the destruction of nature, as you seek a path to which you're being called. So here's the story I want to begin with. Hasidic Jews tell the story of a Rebbe's son who began leaving synagogue during morning prayers to go wandering in the woods. The boy loved being alone in the forest. His father, the Rebbe, was concerned, and not only because the boy was neglecting his prayers, but because the woods were wild and dangerous. So one day he took his son aside and asked him, "Why do you insist on going out there alone in the forest? I notice you've been doing that a lot lately." And the boy replied, "I go into the woods to find God." "Ah, that's wonderful," replied his father. "I'm glad you're searching for God, but you don't have to go anywhere to find the Holy One, blessed be his name. God is the same everywhere." "Yes," answered the boy, "but I'm not." There's something different about us when we are in nature and seek to listen. In the biblical text, God lures the prophets as well as shepherds leading their flocks, those providing leadership over and over and over again, into the wilderness, and there to listen for a voice in that sheer sound of silence that prepares them to lead. And that's what I want to invite us to today. Indeed, in Hebrew, the word for wilderness, midbar, ba midbar, and the Hebrew word for that talks about God speaking creation into being, dabhar, have the same root. And the root of both the wilderness and the one who speaks in the wilderness is lead, is a word that actually points to leadership. So to go into nature, into a wilderness, is to go into a place where the Holy One lures us, speaks to us, and prepares us to lead. So my purpose here in these next few minutes, as we begin with a spiritual practice, is to invite you to that God task of being lured into the natural world. Let's not go out and decide we know what's best for our congregation or our campgrounds or the world at large without actually going and being in conversation with and relationship to the non-human others who share and inhabit the places that we occupy. This is a place to which you are called, and I invite you into relationship with the land, into conversation with another created being, a non-human other who wants to teach you, love you, mentor you, call you, challenge you with love to listen and learn. And so settle back, take a few breaths, and read with me, wander with me for a few moments in this text from Job. But ask the animals, they will teach you. The birds in the sky, and they will tell you. Ask the plants of the earth, they will show you the way. And fish of the sea will declare to you. So I'd like you to imagine for a few minutes as you sit with this text in silence that you can hear somewhere in your being a voice that's sounding, calling you to get up and go somewhere, to come into a place that needs you, that calls you, that beckons you to come and listen to what it wants to show you. Where is that place that's calling to your heart? Your home, the garden, the land on which your house is built, your neighborhood, maybe a congregation or campground, maybe a nearby park or someplace truly in the wilderness in nature. But it might even be a busy urban street in the heart of a metropolitan jungle. Just listen for the place that calls you. And imagine too that you are heeding the summons, that you are now getting up out of your chair, walking away from your computer and going to this place on the earth that is calling you to come, a place where you can ask another creature to teach you and show you the way. A place where you can ask another creature to teach you and show you the way. And imagine yourself now just wandering there. And a non-human, some created being, perhaps the land itself beckons you, speaks to you, sings to you, and invites you into a relationship, into a conversation that's already going on. And there you will spend time, not just this time, but maybe hours listening. And when it's your time to speak, ask, what is needed here? And ask, how can we, my community, be of service to this land? Hear this text again in its fullness. But ask the animals and they will teach you. Ask the birds in the sky and they will tell you. Ask the plants of the earth and they will show you. Ask the fish of the sea and they will declare to you and point the way. Who among all of these does not know that the hand of Yahweh, the sound of the breath, the sound that is the breath of life, has done these things? In God's hand is the life of every living thing and the breath of every beloved being. And so as we have journeyed just in this very brief time, that's not enough time to really sink into the beauty of this text. I invite you to spend time this week not doing this journey in your imagination, but really doing it, really sitting with the text and listening for a place and going and being present with one who would teach you. God's love is way too expansive to be comprehended in the abstract. And loving the earth as a whole and saving the planet is too big a mission to undertake. And so we must enter into a particular relationship with another creature. We must hear the earth's pleas for our action. We must live in loving engagement with teachers, mentors, friends, lovers in the world. That is what I invite you to. And we will be coming back to share together what we begin to learn and hear next week. But even if you don't plan to be with us next week, this invitation stands. Ask the land and the beings who live there what they desire. Wander through the space to which you're called with an open heart, asking of the sacred presence there, the trees, the stones, and squirrels, what is needed here, and how can we be of service to the land?
Thanks, Laurie, for that really grounding and challenging exercise for us. So important. Next, we want to look at the learn and dialogue and network quadrant and listening to some people talk about how they first got going. In some cases, it might have begun as a top-down approach, in others a grassroots one. But note the consistency of collaboration. These are not stories of trying to convince everyone in the congregation to take a stand against climate disruption. Rather, they're about responding to initial ideas and opportunities. We begin with 5 brief introductory clips, and then we'll watch more of these interviews a little later. Remember that next Sunday will be our Q&A session, so jot down or put in the chat questions as we go.
Hello, I'm Sarah Allen, and I attend the Capital Area Center Community of Christ in Lansing, Michigan. I am a pastor and a 70 at that congregation. We have a pastorate of 3 people who help us in what we have envisioned to do for our congregation. At Capital Area, we got involved many years ago of creating a green team for our congregation. And in that, we decided what do we want to do to be more environmentally minded, to live out the sacredness of creation within our congregation. And within that green team, we came up with a bunch of things to do, a big list, and we have successfully done several things.
My name is Dan Nowicki. I serve as part of the Mission Center President team for the Michigan USA Mission Center. My membership is in the Capital Area Congregation, which is in Lansing, Michigan. But today I want to talk some about our Detroit properties owned by Community of Christ. Part of my role on the Mission Center President team has been supporting the Detroit Hope Emerging Congregation, which has been there for several years, and managing the properties owned by the church overall. The congregation kind of got involved in energy efficiency work as the World Church and Mission Center leaders have been encouraging congregations to think about environmental stewardship. and started probably around 2015, I think, as part of a pilot with Interfaith Power and Light Michigan to record energy usage in houses of worship, and then to work on projects that could help reduce our energy usage and improve environmental stewardship. So at that point, we entered some data from our utility providers, and I think had assessments from the local Detroit energy company, got free LED screw-in light bulbs, did some window replacements, things like that. And then after that time, there were reductions in church staff, and so we lost the position at the congregation, and things kind of were on hold for a few years.
So I'm Linda Stanbridge. My pronouns are she and her, and I live in Lexington, Michigan at the Blue Water Campground. I'm a member of Blue Water Congregation, which meets at the campground, and it's a unique congregation that meets 4 times a year for retreat-style congregational gatherings at the campground. We had been exploring what it looks like to do mission in a new congregational model. And being that we meet at the campground, the grounds are sacred to us, but also just sacredness of creation is something the congregation has focused a lot on. I've been familiar with the Monarch Watch program. Previously, I worked at the Kansas City Zoo for a few years, and I became aware of the program. So when we first arrived here, one of the things that was important to my husband when he became the caretaker was to start mowing a little bit less. And in order to make other people comfortable, because change is hard, he would slowly mow a little bit less and a little bit less. So and as we did this, we noticed we were having a ton of wildflowers that were just voluntarily coming up and were stunningly beautiful. And I think it was our second year here, we noticed that we had a lot of monarchs. And it triggered this memory for me of the way station we had at the zoo. And I approached the congregation, the pastor, and talked about doing this as a congregation project during one of our retreat weekends. And it was a great project because there were things for people of all skill levels: planting flowers, planting seeds, digging holes, doing a lot of different projects. But it was something that the kids, the adults, the older adults could all participate in. And it's a really neat and pretty simple program.
My name is Aaron Richards, and I'm from the Orange congregation in Orange, California. Over the past, say, 5-ish years, our congregation has worked on improving or changing out our landscaping to be more drought tolerant and climate friendly. So really a lot of it started probably more than 5 years ago when we decided to pull out this large grass area that was on the side of the sanctuary that you can see from the large windows in the sanctuary, just a huge plot of grass. And a team of congregants, myself and others included, pulled out that grass and laid down different beds for gardening and kind of created a community garden. And that went on for a while, and that was backed by a lot of people in the congregation, but we had a couple families in particular that were really passionate about it, and it was great to get those families together and have everyone kind of rally around this.
My name is John Vanderwalker. I'm the Inland West Mission Center president, and I've served in the past as a Mission Center president, a field officer, and a manager for Samish Island Campground Retreat Center. Because not only was I the guy that managed the books, but I was also the person that paid the bills. And when I was getting bills from the power company and the propane companies, I was astonished at how big our energy footprint was. There was already some serious talk when I got to Samish about converting to LED lighting for the campground. And the plan was to convert the main buildings to the campground, meaning the Christian Fellowship Center, or better known as the CFC, and the dining hall to LED, and then to progressively change out screw-in light fixtures as they burned out and change them into LED lights. There was a growing desire to do that among the board. They were going to convert existing fluorescent lights to LED tubes.
From Michigan, Southern California to Washington State, action began in a variety of ways. From an idea floated to the congregation.
Oh, huh?
Somebody's
Margie
not.
changed that too.
At
She
2.
just hasn't done it this one, the one before dinner. She said.
Okay, I can do this and then I'll get her drinks.
Okay.
Somebody's not muted. Okay, thanks. From an idea floated to the congregation by passionate people or families with ideas, to dialogue and team formation, to explore possibilities, to being approached by other organizations for participation. In Kitchener, Ontario, Canada, our experience has been similar. We began our journey in 2019 with a suggestion from one person to turn the adult Sunday school time for about 4 months into an exploration into the realities of the climate crisis. We wanted it to be entertaining and powerful, as well as educational, so we adopted an approach of watching and then discussing videos. We broke out clips of about 20 minutes in length from both of Al Gore's movies, An Inconvenient Truth, and then an inconvenient sequel, Truth to Power, as well as Matt Damon's documentary, After the Flood, and all of Greta Thunberg's TED Talk. We watched and discussed and worked at wrapping our minds around the realities, and we brainstormed about possible actions. Participants began finding and suggesting additional video clips, like the Kiss the Earth documentary on regenerative agriculture. Some of us began to participate in the local school strikes for climate, and we participated in an interfaith session on learning strategies for advocacy. Then the pandemic hit, and like so many people everywhere, we were overwhelmed and struggling to find our way through it. It took a year before we felt whole enough and energized enough to form a congregational climate justice team. Again, we didn't go the route of a formal proposal to a business meeting. One person said, "I'm interested in exploring possible climate actions to take. If anyone else would like to join me, please send me an email and we'll get a group going." Well, within a week, we had an ad hoc team of 8 people. We decided to go bold, and we called ourselves the Kitchener Climate Justice Team. No one objected. We began holding weekly Zoom meetings to discuss and explore and brainstorm. This team approach has been a real blessing, as each member has been able to explore and develop the areas they're most interested in, then keep the team updated as we consider action steps. We've begun networking with other local groups that we never even knew existed until we began asking questions and exploring. Before we move on to our next quadrant, we want to hold up for you some of the excellent organizations and resources that are available to assist you and your congregation or any other group you may be part of in getting started. The Community of Christ Earth Stewardship Team page on the cfchrist.org website has some excellent downloadable resources as well as links to recommended books and organizations. The very comprehensive Green Congregation Checklist has a link to the Web of Creation, an organization sponsored by the Lutheran Church to foster the movement for personal and social transformation to a just and sustainable world from a religious perspective. Earlier this year, the Earth Stewardship Team released 5 downloadable lessons that are available for free through Herald House, exploring not only climate change as a separate topic, but also poverty and social justice, water and ocean issues, and plastics. These lessons are excellent choices for congregational groups to work through, and each provides links to additional resources. Dan Nowicki talked in his interview about having been approached by Interfaith Power and Light. There's a website for different organizations as well as individual site for the state chapters. Also as a source of information, inspiration, and resources for faith groups looking to address climate change by stewarding creation. And finally, we want to hold up a Canadian organization called Faith and the Common Good. Sponsored by the United Church of Canada, this interfaith network supports diverse faith and spiritual communities to contribute towards a greener, healthier, and more resilient neighborhoods. Under the Resources tab are some excellent resources applicable to congregations in either Canada or the USA, including an Energy Star action workbook for congregations and a do-it-yourself walkthrough audit manual for buildings. As we begin discerning and learning, we're also taking those first steps. We want to take a closer look at some of the ways different groups have got started. We've been fascinated with the diversity of approaches that were the first steps with the congregations and groups interviewed, but also some of the consistency. The role of discernment and following the enduring principles, the many organizations that can be partnered with who are already taking action, as well as the economic benefits of finding grant money and realizing lower operating costs. For most, one of the first steps has been looking at ways to reduce the carbon footprint of their facilities. Let's begin with John Vander Walker at Samish Island Campgrounds in Washington State, as he talks about one of their first steps, the energy audit.
That I had some experience with energy audits in the past, and I'm a devout listener of National Public Radio, so there was a supporter of National Public Radio in the Sound area there that was called Sustainable Connections, and they were a organization, not-for-profit organization, that helped businesses find energy savings through energy audits. So I connected with Sustainable Connections, convinced the board that we should do that, which wasn't terribly hard to do. And we spent $250 to have Sustainable Connections come to the campground and do an energy audit. It was an incredible thing because I watched Orion, that was the young man who did the audit, as he went through every building and looked at every electrical and gas appliance that we had on the property. He looked at every water using device on the property, took down all of the model numbers of everything, and then went back to his office and started running the numbers according to the numbers, running the numbers of the appliances that he had inventoried. He came back to us with free water saving devices to put into all of the water using, sinks, in the kitchen, bathrooms. He counseled us on the replacement of toilets. When it was all said and done, an energy audit had 50 some things that we could do that would save the campground money. And one of them was the LED lighting. Sustainable Connections then started leveraging their influence and a program that was in existence with the Puget Sound Energy. They leveraged that to help us convert the entire campground to LED lighting. Sustainable Connections gave us enough screw-in LED light bulbs to convert every fixture in the campground that was a screw-in fixture with a screw-in LED light. And then they got PSE to cost share with us to not upgrade the existing fluorescent fixtures, but to replace all of the fixtures in the campground that were fluorescents with LED lighting. The projection was that we would be able to pay for this upgrade in about 5 to 7 years. After the first summer running with these new lights, I saw, because I was keeping the books, that we were saving about $13 a day in electricity, which reflects directly into a carbon footprint. So as I started doing the math, we actually paid for that expansion of lighting. And I believe it cost the campground about $13,000 for that. And we paid for it in 3.5 years instead of the 5 to 7 years that we had projected. So that I highly recommend, if you have a facility, in fact, it's my policy as Mission Center president now that if you're going to remodel a church, whenever that happens, if it ever happens again, that you have to have an energy audit before I'll approve your remodel. Energy audits are just an extremely good way to find out ways to save money and ways to help save the environment.
We previously mentioned the website for Faith in the Common Good, which has a free downloadable do-it-yourself energy audit guide. This is a great start, especially with a team working through the audit, because it increases our awareness of the options and possibilities. John has strongly recommended investing in a professional audit before any remodel project. We'd go a step further and recommend that every congregation or group with a facility schedule an audit. Look at the recommendations, the costs, and the projected return on investment for each proposed change. Begin with the ones with the most attractive or shortest return on investment period. Saving money while we reduce our carbon footprint is a win-win strategy. Listen to John's full interview on our website, to learn about some of the other changes they've instituted and the witness opportunities that come from them. But now we want to look at just a few of the many actions that have taken place in the Michigan Mission Center and Detroit Hope Emerging Congregation. Let's listen again to Dan Nowicki.
My wife and I authored a resolution that we submitted to a congregation and then to the Mission Center Conference in 2013 that focused on environmental stewardship and encouraging that in our congregations and at our campgrounds. So the resolution looked at encouraging the elimination of disposable tableware and individual serving containers, those sorts of items. It also asks the boards responsible for campgrounds and congregations to look at ways to reduce energy usage and the consumption of resources, whether that be through programmable thermostats or fixes to reduce energy loss, those kinds of things. And then it stated that recycling be implemented in all Mission Center facilities wherever that was available. And then finally, we had a resolution or a paragraph in the resolution that created an Earth stewardship team that could be appointed by the Mission Center president for gathering resources and data and sharing things with congregations and campgrounds to live out the resolution. And we were kind of discerning, what do we do since we didn't have a paid pastor? The emerging congregation was struggling. We no longer had this official relationship with the apartment complex. We had to decide what could we do. And initially we had taken an authorization to sell a resolution to the Mission Center Conference to give us some flexibility to explore options. But we didn't ultimately consider that. And instead we kind of refocused on how we could support ministry in the neighborhood. And in that process, we reached out to partners, including Voices for Earth Justice, who is an environmental justice focused group very close to us. And we, at some point, were approached with the option to kind of re-engage with Michigan Interfaith Power and Light to go back about the work we had started on the building. So we did some energy assessments again with the utilities and found out what our next steps could be for potential building improvements. And then we had I had the opportunity to go to a statewide conference in Detroit and happened to meet the manager of a nonprofit food pantry ministry who was looking for a space. They were a few blocks from us and needed a new space, and everything worked out where they could rent part of our facility to do their ministry, which had some focus on water rights in Detroit. And at the same time, an opportunity came up to join the Detroit 2030 district, which is a local chapter of a national movement to get cities and building owners to reduce their carbon footprint. So all these things kind of just started to fall together. The Voices for Earth Justice group also got involved in a large grant proposal to do a community design project where they would engage the neighborhood on what they wanted to see and how they could help make change. And all of that sort of came together to a point where we started replacing light fixtures in our office building that was rented out, but managed by the Mission Center. And then the congregation started to get involved with what they could do next. And then that's when the pandemic hit us. So since that time, we've kind of been on hold with specific plans, but what we have accomplished are the replacement of lights, all the screw-in and tube lights to LED fixtures, along with our external lighting, which those were running quite a bit on old, pretty high use bulbs. So those have all been converted to LEDs now, and we receive rebates to help with that through the utility company. And we also actually got the external fixtures all donated and labor donated by the contractor who we had reached out to. They were gracious enough to just do that for free, knowing that we were a small church in the neighborhood. And we've fixed our downspouts and gutters and some roof issues to get all of our drainage working. And we're now in the process of getting we've got 2 potential grants to help us with installing native plants and rain gardens to manage our green stormwater runoff. So we're really excited as a mission center to better manage the office and church buildings. And by doing that, we've been able to reduce some of our operating costs and be better stewards for the environment, while also letting the congregation focus solely on ministry and leadership development and their programs with fewer costs to the emerging congregation. So overall, it's been a win-win. And then we've partnered with our organizations in the neighborhood to really create some, I think, great momentum for what we can do, not only with our parcels, but the whole probably 5 or 6 city blocks that can hopefully be connected together, focusing on the environment, urban farming, sustainable energy, stormwater management, and in the whole holistic process of caring for creation there.
Check out Dan's full interviews on our website. We hope to have all the interviews up this week for a lot more actions, including a unique strategy to benefit from solar panels. I hope you caught the sense of how, once a group starts to research and take action, unexpected opportunities and potential partnerships begin to emerge. The experience of the Kitchener Congregation Climate Justice Team has been similar. We began with that Sunday morning discussion group and publicized the details on our sign out front. That caught the attention of a local group working with our regional government to create a 30-year plan for reducing carbon footprint by 50%, while also dealing with a very high level of immigration. They approached us to do some information sessions with us. Out of that, we had the opportunity to provide feedback on the draft regional plan, and we had a session by Zoom showing us how and why to use a carbon footprint calculator. One of the organizations they put us in touch with was looking for faith groups for a pilot project installing a small food forest or fedge using a soil enrichment planting method called lasagna gardening, which we took advantage of. They provided the plants and lasagna layering materials. We provided the location, manual labor, and snacks. In addition to enriching the biodiversity and porosity of our soil and attracting pollinators, we're looking forward to the berries, rhubarb, and asparagus next year, and for opportunities to share the bounty with our neighbors. At the same time, we've begun reading that do-it-yourself audit manual, and we began the process this summer of going through the audit, which unfortunately brought to light 2 hidden maintenance issues that had been going on for some time, but which we were totally unaware of. So now we're currently dealing with options and costs for those. Once we have our proposed list of changes along with projected costs and savings, we'll be recommending beginning with those that will pay for themselves within a year. So now Susan is going to guide us through the next quadrant.
So as we align our planning with the spiral, we move from quadrant 3, which is focused on taking some first steps that can draw us into a larger plan of action, to quadrant 4, where we consider broader issues. A journey always begins with one step, but the path forward lures us into another step and another, excitement and wonder building as we go. Yes, urgent action is needed to reduce global emissions of carbon dioxide as soon as possible, but the spirit also moves us to pay holy attention to broader ecological issues such as biodiversity, consumerism, and habitat renewal. Quadrant 4 also reminds us that all we undertake must be grounded in faith and hope. As a church community, we are called to consider how our congregational decisions fit into the mission of Jesus Christ. Here are 3 more examples of congregations and campgrounds that have begun to decrease carbon emissions. Actually, it's 4 more. Address the wider issues and connect to mission and community outreach. You've already heard from John Vanderwalker about his decision to mow less around the Samish Island campgrounds. In the first 2 videos in this section, both Linda Stanbridge and Aaron Richards talk about efforts to create a more environmentally friendly approach to lawns and landscaping. There's a national movement promoting the return of lawns and land to wildlife, native plants, and insects. In Nature's Best Hope, Douglas Ptolemy writes, "Lawn dominates landscapes in all but our driest ecoregion. Turf grass has replaced diverse native plant communities across the country in more than 40 million acres, an area the size of New England. And we are adding 500 square miles of lawn to the United States each year." A 2005 turf grass study showed that the small state of Maryland alone had 1.1 million acres of lawn, more than twice the area allocated to its state parks, state forests, and wildlife management areas combined. Unfortunately, these figures are typical of most American landscapes. So let's listen to Aaron Richards as he shares the journey of the Orange congregation from simply setting up a peace garden to rewilding the church property with drought-resistant plants adapted to the changing climate in California.
So I think it all started with the peace garden, what we call it, the community garden that we were working through. And then once we saw kind of how that landscaping worked with our facility and our campus, as well as just realizing that we had other opportunities to cut down on some of the resources that we're using, particularly water and other, we decided to start looking at possible options for drought tolerant landscaping. So we had trees and grass and hedges and your typical probably congregational campus. We had that throughout. And a couple of things we had to consider. We have a church, or excuse me, we have a school that rents out the campus during the week. And this school is for kids that have some behavioral issues that they're working through. And so, the landscaping had to be suitable for kids going through. These are elementary age kids, so got a lot of wear and tear. So in some areas we just did basic turf because we knew that they needed a spot to be able to play and kick a ball around or whatever else. And then in the other spots, did a lot of the typical rock and some small succulents, but also keeping in mind that that landscaping had to withstand the other people that were using the campus. So that process probably took, going through everything took a handful of years, and we talked about it more at some points and less at others, just as we were trying to figure out exactly what we wanted to do. But then ultimately, probably about, I don't know, 3 or so years ago, we pulled the trigger. And although we did the peace garden ourselves, it was literally backbreaking. And so we decided for the larger campus that we would hire somebody. And we started off first using someone local that could use just kind of small pieces at a time. And we phased through a couple of those pieces based off of not only just kind of the timing, but also, a cost standpoint is, can be pricey if they're tearing out different things. And then towards the end, we hired another group that kind of came in and did the final, swish through, and they did a lot of the irrigation setup as well. So the whole campus now is drought tolerant, and or the AstroTurf, which I guess is drought tolerant as well. that company set up drip watering systems so that, we're watering far less than what we did in the past. As well as, just from a maintenance standpoint, we used to have, a gardener and a team that would come in and do all the hedging and all the grass mowing, on a weekly basis. We still have a company that comes and helps maintain and pulls weeds and make sure that the drip systems are working, but it's at a far reduced effort and cost, as well as just thinking of the different things that have to go into maintaining the old landscaping versus the new landscaping.
So you've already heard Linda Stanbridge share about the Monarch Butterfly Way Station on the Blue Water Campgrounds in Michigan. In this video, Linda shares some advice for anyone interested in establishing their own Monarch Way Station. She and her husband also decided the environment around the campground would benefit from mowing less, so you'll hear about that experiment. And she also shares her vision for expansion in the future and the way it could draw people from the community into relationship with the campgrounds and church.
I would say if I was going to give advice before starting or taking on this project with the way station, it would be to make sure that you have a management plan and that you understand the commitment that you're making. Because if you don't do it the right way, if you don't provide the right types of plants and the right variety of plants, it's beneficial, but you're not going to be providing exactly the habitat that monarchs need. So have a plan for ongoing management, how you'll pay for those things, where you can get your seeds from, and paying attention to what are native plants. It is, again, not a ton of work, but it is something you need to have a plan for management for. I think if it's an area where we live here, so we can be monitoring it regularly, that makes it a little bit easier too. One of the things that became important for us when we came to the campground was to begin mowing less. And there are a lot of reasons for that. One, it was using really a ton of staff time. And when we're thinking about managing our campground and just how much property there is, it didn't make sense to be doing as much mowing as we were. With less mowing, we noticed within the first season, once the brush started to fill in, we get a lot of migrating birds in the spring, especially in May is the big month in Michigan for migrating birds. And we noticed that that brush fills up differently now in the spring. We're noticing a lot of smaller birds. This year we had a pileated woodpecker, which I don't think that had to do with less mowing, but we're incredibly excited. We're hoping he stays. But also, providing those little brushy areas for some of the smaller animals on the ground that have so much benefit for our ecosystem, and using less fuel. The amount of money that we spend, plus just the sheer climate impact of mowing that many hours, makes an amazing difference. And I think it's something that for us was an easy thing to give up. We started doing it a little bit at a time because it can be hard when we make changes to our sacred spaces. But the benefit, the increase in the wildflowers, and then we do get more monarchs, but of course we get lots of other pollinators as well. The change has been pretty cool to watch unfold over the last 5 years. One of the projects that we're working on this fall is actually marking out some of our natural trails and identifying some native plant species that we have found throughout the campground. I have a little bit of experience as a naturalist, and it's been fun for me getting to know the campground more intimately and realizing what a wealth of experience is available here. And I think so many people don't realize it's right in our own backyard. My husband and I have really enjoyed getting to know the native plants here. And we thought it would be an interesting idea to order little markers to place around the campground and have sort of a scavenger hunt or a checklist that guests can use when they come through, and a map of where they might find those plants and have an opportunity to experience something a little bit different. We also have scheduled in the spring a migratory bird walk, which we will be inviting the community to join us and have the experience of walking the grounds and just listening quietly to the way God is working, the way that's expressed through the birds and all those amazing sounds and experiences that we have here.
Jim and Jan Poirier of Barrie Community of Christ, Ontario, Canada, are committed to a lifestyle based on the whole food, plant-based diet. Along with regenerative agriculture practices and eating more locally produced food, decreasing consumption of meat is one of the recommended agricultural approaches for making a direct and immediate impact on carbon emissions. As the Poiriers teach and model their lifestyle, people both inside and outside the church take notice and begin asking questions. It's an opportunity to connect lifestyle with our enduring principles and witness of who we are. We hope to offer a webinar in the future about making healthier choices about agriculture and eating habits.
Hello, my name is Jim Poirier, and I live in Blue Mountains, Ontario, Canada, and that's about 2 hours north of Toronto. We are members of the Barrie congregation, and we are both retired. I'm a retired church appointee. And Janet?
Hello, I'm Janet. I am a retired RN, and I was a nurse for over 43 years, working in various aspects of healthcare.
We're learning that everything is connected, and we're seeing that animal agriculture is affecting the planet. We're seeing that between 18 and 51% of all greenhouse gases are produced by the animal agriculture industry. So we believe that, and like many others, believe that going plant-based quickly will alleviate a lot of the issues around climate change. And it's something we all can do. We've decided that, yeah, not only are we going to start talking about food and health on our Zoom meetings, but we're going to talk about the planet. The biggest fish consumer in the world is the animal agriculture, because they're feeding fish pellets to the factory farms. And so all of this came out of our journey in plant-based, but it comes out to a ministry of compassion, a ministry for the environment, and we're kind of just springboarding off what we're doing to get into this other area that we never thought that we'd be getting into.
Yeah, veganism is built on compassion. And so it seemed a natural evolution for us to move into all these different directions and to value justice and peace and the various enduring principles that the church stands for and what they profess to claim to be the way we should think about surviving on this land, and to appreciate each other and the animals and the earth as one. And so our role here, we feel, is to just go along with that and to stand behind and to support these ways that we all have of actually making a difference.
And on the other hand, people will see us and they will come to see us and say, yeah, we understand what you're doing. And there isn't a time when we don't talk to people about our faith, and thank gosh for the enduring principles that the church has, because this lines up beautifully with sacredness of creation, the worth of all creation, grace, generosity, and so we're excited about aligning with the church's mission.
Capital Area Lansing, Michigan has upgraded their lights to LED and leased solar panels for their clean energy. Sarah Allen is from Capital Area and is passionate about what the congregation is doing. She shares in this video some of the other efforts the congregation has initiated. Sarah deeply cares about safe drinking water in her state. She shares with us both her passion for advocacy and her plea to get involved to make a difference wherever you are.
We have changed out the light bulbs. We put motion sensor lights in the bathrooms so that when we leave, if someone goes in there, that's not a problem. They turn off on their own eventually, which helps save a lot of energy. When we are able to do potlucks, we try to encourage our people to bring their own plates and utensils so that we can not have throwaway. We do a hot dog Wednesday each week where we hand out hot dogs to the neighborhood. This last week we handed out 180 hot dogs to about 150 people. And while we do that, we have a bin for trash, and then we have a bin for water bottles and pop cans. During hot dogs, we also do, we hand out used clothing and shoes to the neighbors for free. They come and they take what they can use, and oftentimes there's toys and all kinds of different things, food also. Anything kind of that people want to bring, we hand that out, which is nice to have, you know, items that are not needed by someone else to be able to pass on to other people. We also have a little book library for books that is outside, and so people can get the free books from there as well. They can drop them off, but they can also take them as well. In the multipurpose room, we have set up a recycling station where we have a bunch of different trash cans that take either pop cans, water bottles, or all kinds of recycling. So we have that, and we are also trying with that to educate our community around us that recycling matters. And so we do that as one of our ways of educating our community. As they come in, they also know, then they see the signs that it's important to recycle. We have put water-saving faucets on our faucets in the building. We have setback thermostats in most rooms. And we've put 5-inch thick laminated foam walls and 8-inch thick ceiling panels in the sanctuary. It's really important to find out what's going on in your community, especially when it comes to legislative features and legislative things that are going on. And with community organizing, when you find groups that are doing environmental work, like the one that we are in, Action of Greater Lansing, our involvement means that anytime that something is going on environmentally or in some other aspect, we can come together because we're this group that's organizing stuff, and we can immediately get our information out to a whole lot of other people. And that's important because more people and more letters to your legislators means action. But you've probably heard of Flint, Michigan, where we've had a major water crisis. And now we have another one in Michigan that's called Benton Harbor. It's over near Lake Michigan. Legislators and leaders in our communities are not doing what need to be done, and that is where we come in. We are the people that we need to take care of one another, and we need to make sure that we hold our leaders accountable. And we hold them accountable by writing letters and calling them and getting in touch with them and just encouraging them to do better. It's not okay to be poisoning people because we just choose not to let people know that something's not right with the water. I'm in the middle of Michigan, and my water from this city eventually ends up in Lake Michigan. And that's kind of how it probably works for most of the state. At some point, it trickles its way down to one of our Great Lakes since we're surrounded by water. Water that we use runs off from those agricultural crops, and it goes into Lake Michigan. Or it goes into our own drinking water. And it's just not what we should be having done to our water. And it's really important for us to get involved and to not just sit back and let this happen. If this is happening in Michigan, I can guarantee you it's happening all over the place. And it's our responsibility to get involved and understand what's going on with our water. And if we know that something, just like in Flint, those people knew their water wasn't okay. You don't drink brown water. If somebody else is drinking brown water, it's my responsibility to get involved. So I challenge you to get involved to make sure that this does not continue to keep happening. We have a whole lot of little kids in Michigan that are going to have lifelong issues because they've been exposed to lead, and there were people in charge that did not care enough for them, and that's unacceptable. If we're going to be a peace church, peace means making sure that people aren't sick because somebody else didn't care.
So Sarah ends her interview with an impassioned plea to consider our children and their needs for the future. There's a lot more congregations who've begun this journey. If you want to let us know who you are, we'd love to talk to you. We need our youth activists. We need our young people. We need all of you. I want to thank the people who've contributed their time and energy to sharing with us their personal and congregational efforts. Please be sure and check out the complete interviews that will be posted on our website later on. You'll notice that in most cases, the congregations became involved because of one or two passionate individuals. These congregations were willing to get behind the efforts, but we recognize that not all are. We hope to address that in a future webinar. All of the presenters will be available to answer questions. If you connect with us and give us your questions, we can get them to those presenters. Some of them may be with us in the conversation next week. So what are you thinking about? What notes did you take today to possibly present to your congregation? What ideas might work with you and your congregation that align with the mission of Jesus Christ and the enduring principles? We're all on the path together, folks. Let's support one another, learn from one another, and share our successes and failures with one another along the way. Lori?
So Rod's going to put up again a reminder of our upcoming events, including next Sunday. And to help us with that, as Susan just invited us to, I really would like to invite you to contact us and put in the chat if you can formulate a question or a topic that just really caught your attention today, and contact us through the week. And again, my thanks as well, both to our amazing interviewees and the time they put in preparing to be interviewed, and Susan and Joan and Rod doing all this editing work. So thank you, thank you, thank you. So again, next week we will see you, and I am, my task now is to come back to your spiritual practice assignment and make sure that you have heard what it is that we're really inviting you to do, because this is where we want to really ground the question of what and how we can be of service to this planet, to the land that and places that we occupy as congregations. So just a couple brief reminders as we try to move through all of this. So listen for and go to a place that calls to you. If you're thinking about doing something at your congregation, go to your church grounds and spend some time there, or your campgrounds. If you have a sense something else is calling you or tugging you, go there. Go by yourself, or go as a group of companions yearning to learn from the earth herself, the service that she desires of you and your community. Go be ready to spend time. This is not a casual, like, go for a couple minutes and, oh yeah, now I got it. Give your time to the earth as a gift and as a sign of your willingness to listen and learn. Go without any agenda other than to be simply present, be willing to receive the wisdom of non-human others and enter into conversation with them. Next, when you go, just wander. Don't go with a predetermined path. Wait till you get there and let your heart be drawn. Listen to the land and where it wants to pull your attention. Don't try to make anything happen. Remember, you're going to have to, in order to engage in conversation, learn another language, because most of us, some here actually on this webinar do, but most of us don't speak Tree yet. Enter into the conversation that's already taking place on the land that we occupy as humans in community. Begin a long process of falling in love. This isn't actually something that you're going to do overnight, but we really want to invite you to experiment with that this week. Relationships take time to form. They can't be forced. They have to be built on mutual trust. So honor and respect the other. Ask for permission, and remember, this is not about our agenda. It's not about solving a problem by using the natural world to tell us what to do. It is a way of entering into kinship in the kingdom of God. Finally, apprentice yourself to the wisdom of nature. Don't try to force any answers. This time around, just start the relationship, and if you feel led, go ahead and ask this question. How can my community, how can we be of service to the land, this land on which we stand? And finally, let yourself start falling in love. Not just appreciating, not just loving in a one-way way. Fall in love so that the relationship between you and the land and the creatures there becomes a reciprocal sacred bond. And we'll talk more about that later. But just really want to invite you to do that this week and bring your experiences back. Now, I know we have, we talked about this at the beginning, and so hopefully you've all gotten these upcoming events into your calendars. We have some closing words of, I want to call them words of blessing that come from John Vander Walker to send us forth today.
This is not part-time. I mean, we cannot approach this as what we think about part-time. This needs to be forefront in our minds. We have a responsibility to God and to this planet to be a leader in the things that you are pointing out through this colloquy. So it's not a part-time thing. It's not the fuzzy thing to do right now. It's the essential thing to do.
Amen and blessings as you consider your response and your desire to love and be part of the new creation that wants to break forth. Amen.